And speaking of Boston, we are lucky to be joined by a true sportsman, a Massachusetts native from ESPN 97.5's Gallant and George, Paul Gallant. Thank you for being in with us tonight.
Anytime. Listen, I'm sorry I'm from Boston. Basically, everyone finds people from them to be there to be insufferable, but hopefully you'll enjoy the takes tonight.
Well, don't be sorry, because you're the perfect person to have in the day we hear from the newest Red Sox, Alex Bregman. So now that he is finally a Red Sox and this saga is over, how do we feel about it?
Well, nostalgic. I'm just going to think back about all the good times that we had with Alex Bregman. I mean, he was here for 9 years, 8 division titles, 4 World Series appearances, 2 World Series titles, 2 All-Stars, nearly an MVP year, and a Gold Glove. And now you're going to have to figure out how to win without what he brings to the table on the field and without what he brings to the table in the clubhouse.
Yeah, the way to feel about it, I feel that it's time for the Astros to decide which way they want to go. I feel like the team's at a crossroads, right? Because if they don't start spending money, which obviously doesn't look like Jim Crane wants to, this team is it's reached its peak. And now it's starting to, it's like a roller coaster. You go to Six Flags and you go all the way up, and then eventually you have to come down, right? So look, the Astros, they're reaching that point where things are slowly going to start going down for them if they don't start keeping some of these players, or if not, going in free agency and adding new players.
Look, the Astros had a great run with that core. Now the only 2 players left from 2017, Jose Altuve and Lance McCullers Jr. I think that fans just need to be appreciative for what they had with Alex Bregman. We hear it all the time. This is a business. It's not a cliche. It's a business.
Yeah.
And it's time for the Astros and their fans to move on.
Hard to do that, though. I mean, we're talking about a guy who we all know from whenever he hit a home run in the clubhouse, looking at the camera like this, walking up to it. He was a lot of fun, and it's going to be really hard to take that next step once again, like they've done so many times when guys have left, like George Springer, like Carlos Correa, like, on top of that, Garrett Cole, too.
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to do it this time? I mean, that's the beauty of sports. It's moving on in a team game, but this is a guy who is going to be very hard to move on from.
And I like that point, because I do feel like maybe that has something to do with Jim Crane saying, I'm only going to pay so much, I'm only going to offer so much, because it's worked, right? It's worked. Like you mentioned all those guys, but sooner or later it doesn't work anymore, right? You run out of luck, and we're going to see if this is the year that the Astros do run out of luck.
We'll have to see the Astros drawing that line in the sand. Now, Bregman coming off one of his lowest years in terms of runs batted in, walks were down last year, but him not being in the lineup still leaves a major void. So who steps up in terms of production?
Well, it's going to have to be Isaac Paredes, who they brought in, and they love what he's able to do. They look at his numbers, and they think that with the Crawford boxes, he's going to be able to pull a lot of balls out of the park in left field at Dyken Park now. But I think the real question you got to ask is, in addition to losing Alex Bregman, can in one offseason you replace both Kyle Tucker and Alex Bregman? It's going to be really hard to do. And man, I feel like a Debbie Downer right now looking at the Astros going into spring training and this season, but this is a lot of offense that they're going to have to find. Are guys going to be able to step up? I hope so, but I'm skeptical.
Well, look, if we do the math, you say you lose Alex Bregman and Kyle Tucker, but they bring in Christian Walker and Isaac Paredes. So maybe it's an even swap, an even trade there. I have hopes for Christian Walker.
We all do.
But look, I think it's not about being a Debbie Downer. I think it's just being realistic, right? This is what it is. But the interesting thing is that baseball is that one sport that it doesn't matter how much your payroll is or who you have on the field. It doesn't guarantee anything, right? I think baseball's that one sport. It doesn't mean just because the Dodgers have gone out there and break the bank and signed everyone, there's times that they still don't win it, right? Until last year. So we'll have to see, but it's going to be tough.
Unpopular take here, but they're not going to replace his production. I don't think they're going to replace the production of Bregman or Kyle Tucker. I think they might get 2/3 of that production if they're lucky. I just don't think that the Astros are as good this year as they were last year. And I mean, that's just what it comes down to. I just don't think that they have the guys to be able to produce over the entire season, but we'll have to see. Now, Paul, okay, you're from Massachusetts. You know the Boston market well. How does Alex Bregman fit in there?
Well, I think young Alex Bregman would have had a tough time in Boston. Because you have all sorts of beat reporters who are getting after you every single day. And when you get off to a slow start, man, they're like wolves up there. But I think that this version of Alex Bregman has become a lot more mature. He's no longer responding to some of my friends in their Twitter DMs, which is a true story, actually happened. I think he is perfect for Boston. His numbers at Fenway Park are insane. This is a guy who has a 375 career average playing there, a 1240 OPS. He is going to be mashing the ball off of the green monster, as they say up there.
Listen, I think what you said is true, right? Bregman now, he's so mature. He knows how to handle the media. I think even in his introduction, right, they asked him about, hey, you were roughed up here after the scandal, the cheating scandal and everything. And he said, yeah, but it's cool. Like, he's past it and he's going to shrug it off. Plus, when he was here, he's one of the most candid players. I mean, he was pretty cool with us, right, and always gave good answers. So I think he'll be fine.
One thing we know about Alex Bregman, he is an absolute pro. He's a pro's pro, and I think he's gonna be just fine with that Northeast media out there. Now, in terms of pitching, right? Jason, we heard from him down in Florida. Lance McCullers looking good, but it's been a while. Okay, It's been a while. How optimistic are we that he will be back, and what do we think a realistic role is for him?
That's a good question. I mean, I think he has to take any role he can take at this point in time. And I say that from this perspective. Look, he's done a lot of great things for this organization. I think he deserves a lot of respect for being a part of this run. But think about it from this perspective. He's had 47 appearances as a pitcher since 2018. He's had 8 since 2021. I mean, we're looking at a guy that just hasn't been able to get out there. And we're looking at the velocity numbers in spring training. They're definitely not yet where we want to see them. I'd like to see him out of the bullpen. There's so much competition amongst Astros pitching when these guys do get healthy this year that seems like that would be a nice place for him to fit. And considering I still have some questions about the bullpen, you lose Ryan Presley. Is Josh Hader going to be more consistent than he was last year? Maybe that is a good spot for him. But again, he's got to take anything he can get. I think he has to sort of earn his way back out there, even though he has been with this team for such a long period of time. Yeah,
it's a pivotal season for Lance McCullers, right? I think this is the year that kind of decides everything. I mean, I don't want to speak for him or for the future or anything like that, right? But at some point, let's, God forbid, he gets injured again, right? Knock on wood. But we got to see it. He said it himself. He thinks he's going to start at AAA. Like you say, he's going to have to earn his spot. So work his way up from AAA, see how he looks out there, and then come back up. And, there's no way you go back into the starting rotation, right? He's going to start in the bullpen, and then we have to see. We'll have to see. Time will tell because, we could, spring training, we can analyze and we can make guesses and whatnot, but until you get out there, and he said it as well today, everything that he's been working on, the new throw-in motion, he said, look, the ultimate test is when there's hitters right there on the plate. So we'll see.
I think wherever and however he can fit into this Astros pitching staff would be a tremendous success for him and for the Astros to just have him back, to have that extra arm, maybe not extra, but certainly to have an arm that they've seen great things from in the past. I will say this, okay? I do hope they bring him along slowly when it comes to game action because there's a tremendous difference, right, between throwing bullpens and then throwing high leverage. It is higher velocity, higher intent pitches. So I just hope that whatever the case is with where he starts, how they continue this rehab, it's a slow process.
I'm with you there. I don't exactly trust this Astros medical staff based off of last year and Kyle Tucker's bruised shin, which was actually a fracture. You got to take your time with him being back out there. But if he does get back out there, let's not get it twisted because I think some people have gotten a little bit frustrated that they haven't seen Lance McCullers in a really long time. If he gets back out there and pitches again, it'll be an incredible comeback story. We should all be rooting for that to happen, and we wish him the best of luck this spring.
It could happen. Look at Justin Verlander when he came back from that Tommy John surgery, and then, he goes on to win the Cy Young. So, listen, it all falls on Lance McCullers. What kind of work he's put in, how he's been handling his rehab, what changes, and also just mentally sometimes maybe we call it ego. If he says, if it's better for me to be in the bullpen than to try to be the same guy that I used to be, you know what I mean? So I think it just falls on him and see how he goes out there and performs.
I'm glad you mentioned that too because he was asked about a bullpen role and unlike Marcus Stroman on the New York Yankees, who handled it about as poorly as you possibly can when being asked about a different role, he actually gave a pretty good answer to it. So I think he's open to it. Yeah. And of course he knows that he has to earn his way back out there.
And the reality is that in those situations, the player rarely wins the battle with the organization, if ever. Now, speaking of Astros pitching, Which pitcher, this can be starter or bullpen, do we expect to have the most impact in 2025?
That's a good question.
You take it.
All right, fine. I look at Hunter Brown and the way that he finished last year, and that's the guy I'm pointing to. Joe Espada said this about him in that series against the Detroit Tigers. He said, one, he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball since he developed that sinker pitch. Yeah. And on top of that, he really trusts him going forward. I look at Hunter Brown, and hopefully any adjustments that are made to that sinker that he's developed over the last year, there's no adjustments made to it that he has to then adjust to. But he was so good once he figured out how to throw that pitch. He is the bulldog of this rotation. And in a contract year for Framber Valdez, maybe it's him, but I trust Hunter Brown more than him right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Hunter Brown as well. Framber, I think we've seen what he's got. Unless he did something over during the offseason and it comes in with a new pitch or just, comes out, lights out, I think we know what Framber can bring to the table. Hunter Brown, I feel like his ceiling's still a little bit higher, especially the way he finished last season too, that second half, and he just got into his rhythm. So I'm with you there. And then, because you think about Luis Garcia, coming off injury, we don't know what he's going to come back like. We already talked about Lance, Christian Javier. We don't know even if he's going to come back this year. It's unlikely. Wisniewski, I don't know. So then Ronel Blanco, I don't know if he's going to repeat what he did last year or, if it's going to be a fall off. So I think Hunter Brown is that one guy that you can count on the most.
He's a 2.51 ERA since he started throwing that sinker. It's incredible, especially with how disastrous the year was to open last season.
That's absolutely true. That the turnaround was just incredible. For me, it's Hayden Wesneski. And I say that because I think we're going to get more of the same from Hunter Brown. I think he's going to pick up where he left off. I think we pretty much know what we're going to get from Framber, which is that we don't know what we're going to get from him on any given day. And Ronel Blanco, I think he's going to be a good, solid starter again this year. But Hayden Wesneski, to me, is that wild card because last year we saw how depleted that rotation got in June, July when they had all the injuries. And with not knowing what's going to happen with Luis Garcia, what's going to happen with Christian Javier, I think Hayden Wesneski, if he comes in as a very solid number 4, number 5 starter, wins them 8 to 10 games this year, that could be a huge impact for this Astros team. Now, do we feel better or worse with the bullpen this year compared to last year?
Bullpens every single year, you're rolling the dice. You really don't know what you're going to get. It's why I thought it was crazy when the Astros a couple of years ago gave Rafael Montero that contract that they gave him. Or last offseason when they gave Josh Hader that deal that they gave him. So I hope that Hader's going to be a little bit more consistent than he was at the beginning and at the end of last year. But is Brian Abreu still going to be the same guy? And you got to replace Ryan Presley. So I feel actually worse about the bullpen this year. I hope that they prove me wrong.
Yeah, I think it's a toss-up, but I feel my gut feeling tells me worse than last year. You lose Ryan Presley, so there's kind of a question there, like, okay, who's going to take his place? What about Forrest Whitley? Does he crack his way into the bullpen? Kind of same thing as Lance McCullers. What's going to happen there? Otherwise, Josh Hader, I feel like maybe he'll be better this year. Brian Abreu, I feel like he had a fall off last year than the year before that when he was lights out. So if he can bounce back, then you've got a good guy there in the 8th spot. But I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit worse than last year.
Well, Luis, you spoke to Josh Hader just last week or a couple weeks ago before him heading down to Florida. I mean, why did he seem optimistic about this season?
Well, just working on remastering that changeup. And, what I really liked about Hader is that he was very self-aware and just said, listen, I got beat up with the fastball last year. Everybody knows that's my pitch, right? And especially in predictable counts, they knew what I was going to throw. So, hitters are going to go and chase that fastball, right? So he went back and just did some self-reflecting, looked at himself in the mirror and said, I got beat up, I got to come with something else. So he's remastering that changeup, and if, he can locate it where it needs to be in the right moments, then, that gives him an extra weapon to really come in there and just close it out.
Location, location, location. Now, speaking of location, what area are you most concerned with for the Astros heading into 2025? We're ending this conversation on a high note.
I guess. Look, The pitching, there's a lot of pitching there, and when they come back from injury, I think the competition is going to be really interesting. It's got to be the lineup. I mean, do you trust anyone in that outfield? And I hate to say that about Chas McCormick, who says, hey, we're going to prove a lot of people wrong this year, or Mauricio Dubon or Jake Myers, but you moved on from Kyle Tucker, and one of these guys has to step up. Is Christian Walker, is Isaac Paredes, is he going to step in, and are those two going to combine to fill the void that we talked about without an Alex Bregman or without a Kyle Tucker? I think we'd all agree the answer is no on that front. The lineup is going to have to carry them, and you're really relying on Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez to be there pretty much every single day if you want to consistently score runs, and that is definitely concerning with Altuve getting up there in age and Yordan always seemingly injury prone.
I agree. It's the hitting, no question. I think the pitching, you have a decent rotation, but you can get by. And if, like you said, once the guys start to come back and there's competition, you have some good pieces. I think the pitching can get by. But the hitting, you're right. I mean, after maybe the fourth or fifth hitter, you start to worry, right? You mentioned the outfield. Jeremy, we don't know what we're going to get from him. Isaac Paredes, his numbers really last year, they weren't amazing. It's more about betting that he can hit it left, and there's that short left side to Dyken Park. And they're kind of just depending on that, okay, he's going to hit a lot of home runs. But other than that, it's like basketball. You live by the three, you die by the three. And same thing in baseball, right, with a home run, right? So for me, for sure, it's the hitting.
For me, it's got to be that lineup because it's like you said, combine. That's the key word, right? These are essentially a number of guys who would be platoon players on other teams. You're expecting them to now play every day, which is a tremendous opportunity for those guys. But at the same time, I don't know that at the major league level, that is what their roles would be on a championship team. And the fact is that I just don't know if the Astros are going to be competing for a championship in 2025.
I'm with you there, man. It's going to be really difficult. I think the good thing they've got going for them always, though, is that they are the class of the American League West, even with some additions made this offseason, specifically by the A's of all teams. So that's what you got to wonder about. If they can get into the playoffs, that's all it takes, as you said a little bit earlier, Luis.
Right.
But they got to get in, and it's going to be tough with a lot of guys missing now.
Well, listen, I think themselves, I can't remember who said it this year, but they've already said, usually we come in here with World Series expectations. And this year is more so like, okay, playoffs. Like they know, okay, we can't aspire for we're not favorites to win a World Series. They know it themselves, right? And it's like, okay, first goal, let's win the division because that secures a playoff berth, and then we'll see what happens. And when you start thinking that way, I think that the writing's on the wall. I just saw on Twitter, they're not even projected to win the AL West. I mean, you talk about the Rangers, they're recovering a lot of guys. Mariners, they weren't going to win it last year, but they choked, right? So let's not forget. And then you mentioned the Athletics making some additions. It's not like the division got weaker.
That's fair.
The division rarely gets weaker, and certainly a lot of questions heading into 2025 as it's maybe a new era for Astros baseball. He is our Massachusetts connection. You can hear him you can hear him on Gallant and George, 12 to 3 weekdays. Paul Gallant, thank you so much
Anytime,
for
guys.
being with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.